This is a summary of the pit market class activity that we did in our Intermediate Microeconomics Class. In our class, we had buyers and sellers. I'm going to start with the buyers. The buyers had red cards. As you can see here, they had cards that went from 4 to 10. And this table here on the left-hand side tells you which card they had. So if you had a 10 of hearts, for instance, then that would mean that a buyer has a value of $10 for the item. And there were 4 people in the class who had this type of card. And in the second row, there were 3 people who had a $9 value. So to use this to get our demand curve, we need to remember that buyers will purchase if the price that they negotiate with the seller is less than or equal to the value on their card. So notice that the price here is in blue and the value is in red. For example, if a buyer has a value of $10, then she is willing to buy at a price of $9 because she'd earn $10 minus $9, which is greater than 0. However, if a buyer had a value of only $8, then he would not be willing to buy at that same price of $9 because he'd earn $8 minus $9, which is less than 0. So to figure out how many people would be willing to buy at each price, we go through the table as follows. Since there are 4 people in the class with a value of $10, then there are only 4 people who would be willing to buy at a price of $10. And so we can start by making a table with price and the number of demanders, so the quantity demanded at that price. And the first row of that table would read, at a price of $10, only 4 people demand the purchase there. And then moving down even further, we can see there are 10 people who would be willing to buy at a price of $8. That's the 4 people who value it at 10, the 3 people who would value it at 9, and the 3 people who value it at 8. And so 4 plus 3 plus 3 makes 10 people in total who are willing to purchase a price of $8. So we just go through the rest of the table. Next up, we go on to the second line, and we can see that there are 7 people who are willing to buy at a price of $9. The way that I get that is, there are the 4 people who are willing to buy at a value of 4 people who are willing to buy who had a value of 10, and 3 people who are willing to buy who had a value of 9. So adding that 4 plus 3 makes 7 people in total who would be willing to buy at a price of 9. To get the following table of prices and the quantities demanded. And then I can graph those points like I have in the graph to the left of this. So for instance, that first point is at a price of $10, and there are 4 quantity demanded there. And then the second point is at a price of $9, and there are 7 demanded there. And that third point is at a price of $8, and there are 10 demanded there. So I'm getting the usual downward sloping demand curve. Next, we'll look at the supply side. Notice that I'm going to start with the lower values of the cards for supply. By that I mean that these are ordered from 2 to 8, and before, in the red cards, I had them ordered from 10 down to 4. So once again, here is a table showing the cards that we had in class. So for instance, there were some black cards, black 2s, and those people have a value of 2. And there were 4 of those in the class. To figure out the supply curve, I'm going to remember that sellers will purchase if the price is greater than or equal to the value of their card. So that is if the value is less than or equal to the price that they negotiate with the buyer. And once again, notice that the price is in blue here, and now the values are in black because these are sellers. So for example, if a seller had a value of $2, then she is willing to sell at a price of $3 because she'd earn 3 minus 2, which is greater than 0. However, if the seller had a value of $4, then he would not be willing to sell at a price of 3 because he'd earn 3 minus 4, which is less than 0. So, since there are 4 people in the class with a value of 2, then there are only 4 people willing to sell at a price of 2. And so I can use this first thing to figure out the first line of my table with price and quantity supplied. To figure out how many will be willing to sell at a price of 3, what I do is I also look at those people who had a value of 3. In total, there are 7 people in the class willing to sell at a price of $3. Those are the 4 people with a value of 2, plus the 3 people with a value of 3, which makes 7 people in total willing to sell at a price of 3. And I can keep going through the process to get the following table. And then I can use that table to graph these points that are in the figure to the left. So that first point there is at a price of $2, and 4 people are willing to supply them. And the second point is at $3, and 7 people are willing to supply there. And the third point is at $4, and 10 people are willing to supply there. Next, I can combine those supply and demand graphs that I already put together, and I get the graph to the right. Notice that the equilibrium price, which is where the 2 lines cross, is at $6 and a quantity of 13. In our actual class exercises, the average price was $5.64, so that's extremely close to what theory would predict. So the nice thing about this classroom exercise is it shows us that our theory, which is using supply equal to demand to find out the equilibrium price and quantity, does a very good job of predicting what the actual equilibrium and price and quantity are in a market. And this makes sense looking at the tables that I put together. Since the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied at a price of 6 for both items. So for practice, please take a moment to pause on this slide and take a moment to look at it and figure out what the equilibrium price and quantity would be in this